Hey guys, and welcome back to the BS Society. So, sit back and relax, grab a snack. This one's going to be a really long video. Let's continue on the issues of Girls Frontline. So, last we left off, we basically talked about the gacha system. Two of them, that is. Um, let's kind of talk more about what you can get with gems, yeah? So, as I said in the last video, you can basically get 4,500 resources, one of them, one of any type, for 480 gems, right? You can get 1,500 of any one of those resources for 180 gems, right? And that's only for one type of resource, okay? Every now and then they'll have like a special deal for double the resources or whatever, but basically, unless you just want to keep farming or something, it's not worth it. You have your dailies and weeklies to give you more resources. Um, then you got your tokens that you can either get 10 for 80 or 100 for 600. Which again, with how the costume system is set up, not worth it. Right? You can get those for free as well. Um, then you have your combat sim energy, right? Which is basically the same thing as stamina and resin. Which you can basically refresh starting at 20 gems and it goes up 20 for each consecutive purchase, right? Basically ending off at 200 gems. There is two types of sims, one for the normal units and one for the newer units. And again, I'll get that later, but basically, unless you're on the monthly card, I would advise not getting that at all, right? Um, And even if you do have the monthly card, what I would advise getting is oath certificates. Um, Oath certificates are used to essentially marry your Tdolls, quote unquote. When a Tdoll's affection gets up to 100, you can use these on them. And again, they're 580 gems each. Unless you get them on special packs, like some of the costumes. The reason why they go to upwards of 2,000 gems is because they end up including a oath certificate. And some of those costumes even include tokens with them. Right. So that is the better place to get oath certificates, which for me, I usually just buy them the way they are. And I'll get more into the affection system later after I get done with combat and all that. But that's what they're used for, right? And then you get down to your main purchases for gacha games, right? So you have your Tdoll expansion purchases, right? Which are 280 gems each for 10 slots. You have your equipment expansion, which is 140 gems each for 20 slots. And then your coalition units, which again are the enemy units that they just added. I don't know yet. I have not really paid attention to them much because I don't have them unlocked. For a lot of gacha games, this is like your main purchase. Like those three, expanding slots is a pretty big deal because, like, for me, if I don't have any more slots available, I'm not going to play the game anymore. So obviously, I'm going to expand to, pretty much as the units are available, right? And especially for equipment, I'm definitely going to expand that. So that way I don't have to get rid of equipment because I'm not using a Tdoll anymore. Yeah. So, expanding a little bit on those is kind of advisable. But Girls Frontline also has this. So most games, you usually only have about one team set up, maybe a PvP's team set up. Girls Frontline, you start off with 4 available slots for teams. Now, the way the echelons work is basically you can deploy more than one into a battle at a time. And again, I'll get to that later on. But um, so you kind of want as many as possible. Now, currently you can go up to 14. You start off with 4, right? Now, most players will usually advise free to play players to try to get those expanded as early as possible because in order to maintain your resources, you want to put echelons into logistics, which you can have 4 echelons in logistics at a time. So expanding to 6 would seem like a good idea. Now, if you want to run your Tdolls through auto battles, which for free to play you would have to use 2 teams at a time in auto battles, you would probably want to expand to 8 at least. So that way you can have 4 teams in logistics, 2 teams in auto battles, and 2 teams in normal battle. Now I would say probably try to go to the old echelon cap, which was 10. So that way you can deploy 4 teams at a time because the more teams you can deploy, the easier a map is, right? And of course you can deploy, your you can deploy echelons from your friends list, but you can't control those. And again, I'll get to that later. But there's that, right? You can also use your gems to expand how many gachas or how many gacha pulls are able to be done at once. When you start off in the game, you can only have 2 Tdolls being produced at a time, 2 equipment being produced at a time. Until you get the heavy production unlocked, then you basically double that, right? So I would advise not really to purchase those, right? And until they're like the last one, right? And one thing I forgot to mention with the gacha system, now that I'm on that, the reason why you want more slots is because every Tdoll is on a timer. So if you don't want to have to wait for the timer, you either get more slots or you have to use quick production tickets, which those you get plenty of, but there's that, right? But again, I would not buy that because that's like not really necessary. If you were to buy those, I would suggest only buying 2 more because for the dailies, you only have to produce 4 Tdolls, and the same thing goes for equipment. So basically, meaning you can collect your Tdolls, collect your equipment, and then produce 4 more, and then leave it alone for the rest of the day, right? And then you have dorm expansion slots, which for dorms, the reason why you want those is for the affection system. I believe you start off with like 2 or 3 at the beginning of the game, and you can buy more just like you can with echelon slots. You really don't need them. Basically, all you really need to do is just switch out your echelons between the first 2 teams because the dorm like slots are basically associated with the echelon number. So if you want, an echelon into dorm 1, you would have to move that echelon into echelon 1, and it's very easy to do that. Basically, you just hold the echelon and then you just move it up the list. So it's pretty simple, right? I would say the rest of the things in the shop is pretty unnecessary. The one other thing that is there is what's called an aid commission. And aid commissions are used for the new gacha system that came out. And I believe you can get 10 of those for like 1,600 gems and 1 for 160. One thing I forgot with the normal tickets is you can buy 10 of them at a reduced price, but again, you really don't need to buy Tdoll tickets and equipment tickets. So, those are kind of negligible. And everything else in the shop is pretty much useless. I haven't really bought all the other useless stuff, so I'm not even going to mention it. Oh, I did actually forget this. You can use gems on purchasing like backgrounds and stuff, but you can use friendship points on that, which goes into the friend system and the reason why you want to use, friendly support and all that. But again, useless, right? Um, so let's get into the combat, right? Um, so Girls Frontline is a strategy-based game, right? Basically, to me, it kind of feels more like Fire Emblem, where basically you deploy, a bunch of troops, and you basically move them around for your turn, right? So the main things is there's two types of battles. So there's a day battle and a night battle, and they're both very, very different. Let's start off with the day battle. So the day battle, you usually have a friendly command post and an enemy command post. These two are probably the most important nodes on the entire map, because if either of those nodes get captured, the game immediately ends, right? So, if your node gets captured, you lose. If you capture the enemy, you win. And it's immediate, okay? There's this thing that I usually call, I like to call it a side cap, because basically if you surround a node with basically the opposite team's capture, it immediately captures the node. So basically say if there's 4 nodes, right? You have enemy, 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 and then your node. Or even a neutral node, which is white, right? Friendly is blue, enemy is red, and then neutral is white, right? If those 3 nodes are surrounding that white node will be captured by the enemy, okay? And what's important to note is usually you'll basically see it say, this node will be captured in the next turn. So basically meaning when the next turn starts, that node will get captured. Even if you're standing on it, that node will still get captured by the enemy, okay? And this was my mistake very early on in the game, where I would capture an enemy node, and what would happen is the other enemy node would be on the other side, and then, there'd be another enemy node in front of me, and the node that I was standing on will get captured because it's surrounded by enemy nodes, right? And it would be vice versa for the enemies, which the enemies usually won't run into that because they only move one space per enemy per turn, right? So generally, you don't have to worry about that happening from the enemy. What you do have to worry about, though, is basically paying attention to your major points, right? So along with the command post, you also have heliport points, which basically allows you to deploy your echelons, later on in the field instead of just at your command post. Not only that, but they give you more points to move with, right? For every echelon and every deployable point, you get 1 additional movement point. So for every map, you start off with at least 2, right? Some you'll have, more because of the heliport point. And that kind of tells you that, hey, there's another deployable point, because some maps start off with heliport points, right? So I would advise basically defending your command post and then those points, right? Those are your most important points to defend. Your command post has to be defended, right? If that gets side capped, you lose the game, right? Now, the reason why I mentioned that if it gets captured immediately, like if a command post gets captured immediately, the game ends. The reason why I mentioned that is because some maps start off with your command post being able to be immediately captured on the end of the first turn. But you can also take your first echelon all the way from the command post or from a heliport point all the way up to the enemy command post and then end the turn on the command post. And when you do that, the enemy post will get captured. Yours won't, because the enemy turn hasn't started yet. And so basically what happens is you immediately win, right? Because you captured their point first. Okay. So basically the way that node gets captured is basically you capture the points first, and then when the turn ends, whoever's turn it was, the nodes that they're standing on get captured, right? So whether it's the enemy or your stuff, whatever, right? And then when the next turn starts, all side cappable nodes will then get captured, right? So they all get captured at the start of the turn, okay? So that's how that works, right? Now for deploying echelons, some stages, especially night stages, will have a limit. And like the newer units that are out now, for the, enemy deployable units that you can have now, they also have a limit on how many you can deploy. So you kind of have to pay attention to that. And like some events will have like maybe only one deployable echelon. So you have to pay attention to that. Now, for deploying echelons on most normal stages, you can pretty much deploy as many as you want. And this is why I say that expanding your echelon slots is probably the most important thing you can do because it means you can have more teams out, which makes the game much, much easier, especially for S ranking them because you'll have more movement space, right? Now, here's another thing to note, especially for stages that limit you on how many echelons you can deploy. If you have to retreat your final echelon, you immediately lose the game. You have to have an echelon on the field or you lose the game. Okay? So keep that in mind. Now, here's the deal though. You don't want to let your Tdolls die because of the affection system. When you start off the game, you have what's called a heavy damage protection that basically forces your Tdolls to retreat when they get too damaged. And you'll know if they're too damaged because they'll basically like lose part of their clothing. Now, if a Tdoll dies, basically not only does she lose affection, but so does the rest of her team, right? And you know what? I guess I'll just go ahead and get into the affection system now. So when a Tdoll dies, basically she loses 10 affection points, and the rest of her team all lose 5. Okay. Now, if the entire echelon team dies, they all lose 10 points. Now, the reason why you want dorms is so that way their affection goes up basically every day with a little bit more ease because it is a pain in the neck to get their affection up, okay? The only other easy way to get their affection up is basically feeding them cakes because one cake equals one affection point. And so if you had 50 of them, you can basically get a Tdoll basically from 50 to 100 instantly. Now, at 90 affection points, you do get a stat boost. And the reason why you want to be able to oath your Tdolls is because I don't think it's at 150. I think it's a little bit after 150. That you get another stat boost. So basically it gives you a barrier between your initial stat boost and losing it, right? So that way your Tdoll can die 6 times instead of just once, before you basically risk losing it. Now, this doesn't come into effect when you're fighting bosses. When you fight bosses or you're fighting in sim battles, if your Tdolls die, they don't get affected. And it's also noted with the heavy damage mechanic that it won't come into force when you're fighting bosses. So you can let your Tdolls die when you're doing boss battles. That's the only time you can let your Tdolls die. Boss battles and sim battles are the only times you can let your Tdolls die. And if you have heavy protection turned on, it won't come into effect in sim battles and boss battles. Since we're talking about Tdolls, another mechanic is that you have to repair your Tdolls. And this is one thing I forgot to mention with gems. You can buy repair slots, and I would suggest also doing that as well, because at least up to an echelon full, because I believe you start for like 3 or 4, and it goes up to 8. And the reason why you want more echelons is so that way you can kind of wait out Tdolls being repaired. Because like machine guns, if you let a Tdoll die, the other thing is it takes significantly longer for them to repair. And some machine guns can take 16 hours to fully repair. So if you don't have a quick repair ticket, you can't do anything for them. And you get quick repair tickets pretty easily, especially if you're running logistics. Getting your quick repair tickets, your quick production tickets, and your gotcha tickets, you get very easily through logistics, and it's why it's very important to have logistics teams. And I would suggest for quick repair tickets, basically only use them if a Tdoll is either critically damaged, takes too long, like, if you have like a 30-minute Tdoll repair and then everybody else is 10 minutes, you can quick repair her, assuming she's basically like the last one there. That is when I'd use it, so that way you can actually continue playing without having to stop. Or you just have more echelons, right? Wow, this is really taking a long time. This is why I made a long video. I am actually out of time now. There's a little bit more for normal combat that I have to cover, specifically for farmable Tdolls that I would like to get to in the next video. And if I have time, I'll get into night missions and all that. So stay tuned for that, and I will talk to you guys later. Peace.